how little we get as women when it comes to kind of that financing for our businesses.
The biggest lesson I learned is you should talk to investors when you're not raising and build a relationship with them. Again, what I've always been looking for are people and not money. If you want money, you can go find money. You can crowdfund, there's so many ways to get money. But if you're looking for an investor, you're looking for a person.
Hello, peers, and welcome to our 2025 International Women's Day episode. I couldn't be more excited to be sitting down today with the CEO and founder of Oova, Dr Amy Divaraniya, here in New York City. Some background on Amy's company, Oova. Oova is possibly the coolest and most necessary women's health company around. Oova is the fertility translator that fully illuminates a woman's fertility, giving us the clearest steps to conception. You know, this idea of understanding our bodies and our fertility is something that's been playing on my mind a lot recently. As young, ambitious women in our late 20s and early 30s, I'm just about to turn 31, we're more career-driven than ever before. And as a result, that family stuff, the family planning often takes a back seat. We're wanting to have children at later stages in life. I know I personally can only foresee myself having children mid-30s onwards. And so getting educated on what that means for us right now and in the future is something that I just think is so important, and I'm very excited to dive deep in today. So without further ado, welcome, Amy.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to speak with you.
Absolutely. Amy, I can't wait to dive in. And today I want to kind of get into yourself, your journey, what led you to start Oova. And so my first question is, where did you grow up? And how has this impacted the choices you've made in your life and in your career so far?
That's a loaded question. We really dove into the deep end.
Oh, yeah.
So I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey. I have just with my nuclear family, I have my parents here. I have a younger sister, and the rest of our extended family is all based in India. So we were really close. Every decision or every choice we had to make was kind of driven by our parents, and there was really nothing done in secrecy, right? And the other thing that was really defined for us is what our career path would be. So there was very little option when it came time to think about what do you want to do as you grow up. And for me, do you want to be a lawyer? Do you want to be a doctor? Or do you want to go into business? There was really no other option. And so I've always had this inclination to go into medicine. I've loved science. It's been just a deep passion of mine. And I don't know, I was just always drawn to it. So regardless of where I was in my education journey, it was always geared towards science in some way.
I find it so interesting because I think what our parents think about, what we should do or how we grew up does often play a really strong role. And so it's so interesting to hear that for you. It was like, great, I'll pick medicine. That's where I'm going down. For myself, it was, I'll pick business. That's where I'm going down. I think what were some of the challenges growing up with that kind of, I guess, expectation around you?
It didn't really leave a lot of room for exploration, right? So it was like, I absolutely love my parents. They're my life. But there were certain situations where you could never really live up to their standards, right? And so you were always striving to be the best that you could be. And it does put an undue pressure on a child, right? Especially somebody growing up in the U.S. I've always been very confident in who I am, so I never felt like the only Indian or the only girl in a room, honestly, until I started Oova. But growing up, I never really felt that, and not really having the chance to explore, because you hear your friends, they're like, well, today I want to be a garbage man, and tomorrow I want to be a fireman. And I was like, that's weird. That was never like an option for me. But it did instill this really deep discipline in myself. So no matter what I do, I go in all in, and there's no option to fail. And I mean, that can be unhealthy in some levels, but in the grand scheme of things, it does create this sense of determination that is really infused in who I am.
How can we get better at kind of taking the lessons that our parents taught us and not being so, and allowing that to just drive us forward, as opposed to, I guess, feeling burdened by that?
I mean, I think, and it's kind of I guess I'm going to call it a prize or treasure that I have, that I had the privilege of being raised in this really loving household where, yes, my parents had expectations, but if I wanted to challenge them, I could. And I've learned what they did well, and I've learned what could have been done better or differently. And so now, as I'm raising my son, we try to pick and choose what lessons we were taught and what we want to push forward. And so now, if you ask my son what he wants to be, I want to be a professional tennis player, I want to be a garbage man, and I want to be an astronaut.
All great, 3 great jobs.
I know. And I'm like, well, you can't do all 3. He's like, of course I can, because I only play tennis 3 days a week. Like, garbage men don't work every single day. He only comes on Tuesdays. And so he has a plan. And I'm like, go for it. Let's see what happens.
Oh, I love that, taking those lessons and paying them forward. Amy, you mentioned you went down the medicine path, and I saw that you were a data scientist for many years. Talk to me a little bit about kind of what that early career looked like for you, and where was your head at that stage?
Yeah, so when I thought about science or biology, I thought medicine. There was no tangential field outside of medicine when it came to science in my head. Again, because I really wasn't able to explore too much, right? But then when I was an undergrad, I was in a pre-med track. I took my MCATs. I had the perfect GPA. I did everything right. But something always held me back from applying to med school. And my parents thought I was crazy because you did all the work and now just hit apply. And I couldn't do it. Something always held me back. And so the other thing I always loved was coding. And so I taught myself how to build websites and how to just code for fun. And if I had to do anything more than twice, then I created an algorithm to do it for me. So I realized at that time that there was this emerging field of bioinformatics that was coming out, which really was the intersection of computer science and biology. And it just felt like a calling for me. I'm like, oh, wow, the world created an industry for me. And when I joined that program, there wasn't a textbook. We were literally learning off of papers. It was such an emerging field because at that point, the human genome was in the process of being completed. And so it was such a new concept. And anything we were finding and doing was cutting edge, which was such an exciting period to be in. And so that's really what drove me to data science. I realized that no matter what you find, if you just look with a different lens, you're adding value to humanity. And that was really exciting.
I love these days that we almost create jobs out of nothing, or there are things that I never thought I'd be a podcaster, and it's extraordinary to me to listen and hear that your journey was oh my goodness, I started coding and the next minute it's wow, I'm in this program. For our peers out there listening who might feel like they're on that straight, narrow path, it's you go to a good college, then you get a good job and you go down the medicine path or whatever it may be, the business world. What advice would you give to us around getting curious about what else is out there?
I think you just said it, be curious.
Yeah.
Don't just settle. And
yeah.
It comes through in so many ways, right? When you go to college, it's kind of like your class schedule is set for you. And if you look at it, it's actually set up for you to graduate in 5 years, not 4, because they want to get an extra year of tuition out of you. So, I mean, you start kind of playing the system a bit and you start asking questions and challenging things. And I think that's when you start to discover what else is out there. The other huge asset I've always had in my back pocket is I've never hesitated to ask questions, and I've always surrounded myself with people who were substantially smarter than me and much more accomplished than I was. Because I think if you do that, if you surround yourself with those kinds of people, the only way you can go is up. You can only improve and continue to learn. So I think that's been my biggest asset, and I would highly encourage everyone to not shy away from increasing their network with people that may feel out of reach for them. Because honestly, if you ask for true help, people are willing to help you and they want to help you.
How can we get better, especially as women, because this is our International Women's Day episode, at putting ourselves out there, at asking for help? I find it really difficult, and I don't know if, I'm sure our peers out there listening, there's someone else who resonates with me on that. I just think I don't sometimes I don't want to be a burden, or I just feel like I will try and figure it out myself. How can we grow that confidence to put ourselves out there and ask for help?
It's honestly just starting. Like you have to jump into the deep end. So if you look at my trajectory, I never thought I'd start a business. I had never took a business class in my life. I literally avoided business classes in undergrad because I'm never going to run a business. I don't want to do it. And here we are today, right? Like I started this company with no network. I didn't even know what a pitch deck was. And from that point, which was 7 years ago, to today, it's the only reason I am where I am is because I consistently ask for help. And the biggest takeaway I have is if you are genuinely asking a question and asking for advice and support, there are so many people who are willing to give it to you. But you have to take that first step. People can see you struggling and they might offer you like cursory advice. But if you're truly ready to like receive that, hear it, and then dissect it for what you actually want to take versus just store away for another day, it's not going to be useful and it's not going to be worth your time. You just need to really be conscious of what you don't know, what you need to know, and how to get that information.
What's been the most challenging part of your journey so far?
I think, so are we talking about start like this company?
We can go into it, yes. That's my next segue.
I think the hardest part has been the learning curve. It's very steep. And of course, when you look back in time, like hindsight's 2020, there's so many things I would do differently today than like the way that things played out. But the hardest thing is having to make really like company changing decisions with minimal information and no, I guess, experience to lean on. You have to follow your gut so much. So I think the biggest challenge for me was being able to truly trust my gut. It's honestly never led me the wrong way, but for me to fully trust it, it took me a long time to get there, and I'm still working on it.
So am I. How can we get better at trusting our gut and knowing that we know the way?
It comes with confidence and practice. I mean, I don't have the right, like this is the playbook to doing that because I'm still working on it. But when you look back, right, and you think about these like pivoting decisions that really shaped where we are today, a lot of those decisions were based on very little information and me just following what I felt was right. And also, no, I don't have an MBA. I've been reminded of that numerous times. However, a lot of the decisions I made don't rely on an MBA. They really rely on where I want to take this business and the value I think we can bring to women. And it's always led us in the right direction.
I think that's just so beautiful and something that I'm personally taking in, and I'm sure a lot of our peers out there listening are as well. Amy, I want to talk a little bit about the segue into Oova. You alluded to it before around, you never thought you'd start a business. But what was that catalyst that led you to get started? And what were the first few steps that you took to really get it off the ground?
Yeah, sure. So I never thought I'd be here. I was at the end of my PhD, and I'm a very type A person. Like, we schedule everything in life. And when I scheduled my dissertation, I was like, okay, we have 9 months. Let's get pregnant, and then my water will break during the dissertation, like the presentation, and I'll get my PhD and a baby same day we're done. Right? Didn't really happen that way, but that was the plan. So we started trying, and I had gone through a lot of health issues earlier in my life. I had been misdiagnosed with PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. I'd been put on a lot of medications I didn't need to be on. And so when it came to my fertility, I didn't really want a doctor to tell me how and when I could get pregnant. I wanted my body to do it. And if it didn't happen naturally, then it just wasn't meant for us. And my husband was on board with that. Really easy decision to make, super tough pill to swallow, because nothing could have really prepared us for the journey that we were on. It was one of the darkest periods of my life. And it was even more devastating because, being the data scientist I am, I collected every piece of information I could. And we were discussing before, but I live in Stanford. And so I used to come into the city for work every day. You can imagine now in Metro North every morning, I'd have all my data spread out on the peak train. Like, I didn't care that no one could sit there. I'm like, I'm going to look at my data right now, guys. Like, no one's sitting here. and trying to just find a pattern in all of these numbers and like symptoms and things I'm tracking. And there wasn't any. The only thing I was really learning was that I had irregular cycles, and I knew that going into my journey. So as I was getting towards the end of like getting close to my dissertation, my PhD advisor called me into his office, and he's like, "So Amy, what do you want to do with your life? I'll make whatever introduction you want. We're coming to the end of this." And I was like, "Well, I don't want to go back to pharma. So do you know of any startup or biotech that is doing something in women's health?" And then I continued to basically go on and do my first pitch of Oova. And this man who's like 6'10", like he's super tall, was standing, and he turns around very slowly and he goes, "You need to build that." And I'm like, "Okay, how do I do that? Like, what does that mean?" And he's like, "I have an investor coming into the office tomorrow. Put together a pitch deck and I'll put you in front of him." I was like, "Okay." So I walked back to my desk. I'm Googling what is a pitch deck.
Yeah. What?
Yeah. And so I spent the entire night and I put together this deck that was 87 pages long. And I very proudly put this in front of the investor the next day. He was one of the nicest people because he tore that deck apart and was like, "You only need these 7 slides." I was like, "Okay, that's great." And so I took every piece of feedback because, again, I had no idea what I was doing. He was the first investor. I didn't even know what an investor was. I'm like, "Okay, so you invest in the company and you get what?" Like, I didn't have anything. And I didn't even have a company yet, right? Like, I didn't have a name for this thing. I had nothing except for an idea in my head. And what I started doing at that point was every person I spoke with, I was like, "Can you introduce me to 3 more people?" And he did, because I was so receptive to that feedback. He introduced me to 3 additional investors who then tore apart that 7-page deck and gave me really great feedback on how to think about market sizing. Like, what the hell is a TAM? I had no idea what I was doing. And it was just one of this, again, a steep learning curve, but man, I was a sponge, and I learned so much from these amazing people who I will forever be grateful for, because they really shaped me into thinking about how to think of a business and how to think about a pitch. Because I started talking about, well, infertility is a growing problem. And the first like true pitch I did which was with my PhD advisor in the room. I started doing the pitch, and he stopped me right in the middle, and he's like, wait, Amy, where is the story?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what's the story?" And he's like, "Are you comfortable sharing why you want to build this?" I was like, "Yeah, I don't mind, but like, who cares about that?" He's like, "People care about that." And so all of a sudden, my entire journey became the heart of Oova. And it was actually really liberating to be able to talk about it, and honestly therapeutic for me, because we were still in the throes of our journey. And to talk about like how necessary a technology like what we were building was, going through it myself, wishing I had that today, was like, it was the best thing I could have done for myself, because it was in a horrible headspace. And so it was a great learning experience. But that's how we got from going through the journey ourselves to getting a pitch deck to getting some form of a business plan, even on paper.
Wow. I have been saying wow under my breath this entire time. I don't know if you guys can hear or see it, but I can finally say it out loud. And I think what's so fascinating about your journey, Amy, is the fact that you really were just one step at a time. I didn't know this, I didn't know that. And I think a lot of the time when we look at founders and people like yourself, we just think, oh, well, she must have known. Like, she must have had, just brainiac or whatever it may be. And I think it's just so important, because the reality is most of the time it's not. Most of the time it is just one foot in front of the other. What am I doing wrong? And I think a huge part of your journey, and just a lot of founders' journeys, is that humbling piece. Humbling yourself to be like, I actually don't know what's going on. At what point in your journey did you feel like, I think I may have got it?
It was when I did a phone call to my best friend. We have been best friends since high school, but it's really interesting because we don't talk every day. But she has this sense that when something is off or going on with me, she happens to call me that day. It's been that way since we graduated high school. And she happened to call me, and she's like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "Well, I think I'm going to start something." And she lives in SF, so very entrepreneurial herself and not like me at all. But I said, I think I'm going to start something in the women's health space. And she's like, how much do you need? And I was like, I don't know. What do you mean? How much do I need? And she's like, okay, got it. And like literally 3 days later, I had my first check in the mail.
Wow.
And the 2 was blank because she's like, put like in the letter she wrote me, she's like, put the name of your company. And she didn't even date it because she's like, come up with the name of the company and then put your founding date as the date. And it's like I still have that check because it was such a reality check for me, right? Like, okay, you're doing this and people believe in you, and now you have, like, you actually are backed by these relationships that you've built throughout your life. And so I think that was the real, like, okay, we're onto something. But from there, it just led to like we just went down this little fundraising journey with friends and family. Honestly, easiest money to get, the hardest money to take.
I agree. Right?
It was so humbling because honestly, in most cases, I never even got through the pitch, and people were writing checks to me, and it's so odd to like look back at that, and like honestly, that money is still the most precious that I've raised, and they genuinely care about the success of not just the company but me, and I think that's a really humbling thing to kind of keep in the back of my mind and keeps me going every day. But when I felt like we had actually discovered something it was much later, but we had our first user use Oova. And you can imagine now when you have your first few users using your product and your platform, you're really careful and you're watching everything. And so she starts using it. And when she registered in our app, she said her period was over a year prior. And so I reached out to her. I was like, is this a typo? Because our algorithm, like, this is really far back. So we don't really know where you are in your cycle. And she's like, no, it's accurate. I had my first child. I'm in the military. I'm still breastfeeding, so my cycle hasn't come back. But I need to have my second child within this period because I only get this much leave. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, let's see what happens. I have no idea where you are in your cycle, but let's try. And we got her pregnant within 2 cycles of using Oova.
Wow.
So I was like, wow, we're actually onto something. And we're able to help women achieve their goals, whatever that may be. And it's not cookie cutter because the off-the-shelf products would not have worked for her.
Could you talk to us a little bit about how the product works? So that's just fascinating, that story to me. Like, you've literally not had a period in a year, and then next minute, how does it work when we use Oova? Like, what are the steps that we need to take?
Sure. It's really easy. That's the
Love
idea.
it. Yes.
Super easy.
Important.
So our kits basically come with 30 test strips that measure 3 hormones. We measure luteinizing hormone, progesterone, and estrogen all through urine. Based on what your health goal is, you could be going through a fertility journey, a perimenopause journey, just general health monitoring, whatever it may be. You select that in the app, and then the app will navigate you on which test to use on which day. So we provide these great pea cups. I have it over here. I can hold it up.
Yeah.
But these are our little pea cups. They're collapsible, so you can travel with them.
We love it.
And then you basically collect your urine, and then our strips look like this. So they look like a pregnancy test. You would basically dip this in the cup. Right? You would hold it there until you see the fluid moving in the window, which takes a few seconds, and then lay it flat for 10 minutes. Once the timer in our app goes off, you scan it, very similar to how you would do a mobile deposit or scan a menu in the restaurant. We scan the window and we give you your results within seconds, and we'll tell you exactly where you are in your journey based on your goal. We give you your actual hormone level, so it's a fully quantitative test. And then the key thing is we also share this data with your clinical team if you're working with one. So a really big component of our platform is that we know that doctors are a critical component of the entire journey. So we're not trying to excise them. We really want to make sure that they're a part of it.
Oh my goodness. I just feel like it's extraordinary hearing that, like, you created that. You know what I mean? As in, like, I just think that, I mean, you're phenomenal. You're a doctor. It's in my notes. Like, how did that journey go? But I just think that at times we just can think as women that maybe we're not enough, or, maybe this idea that we do have won't play out for us, and, who will buy from us, or what will that look like? And I think I've had so many moments in my journey, through this business, through this podcast, just thinking, my goodness, like this is really tough and difficult. And who am I really? What would you say to our peers out there listening who perhaps feel that, who are listening to your journey and going, oh, that kind of, wow, I didn't expect her to be, have that background. What advice would you give to us?
You really need to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. And I can give you a really good story here. When I was fundraising, you have no idea who's a good investor and who's not, right? People, if you want to get money, you can get money from anywhere. Yeah. There's smart money and then there's stupid money, right? And I didn't know that. But what I started realizing is the people that are investing in you are not, it's not like a one-time transaction. They're in it for the long haul, and you're going to have to interact with these people over and over again. So you better like them, and they better like you. So I was in this one diligence meeting, and it was an interesting setup because like all of the partners and decision makers were around the table, and they were asking me questions that were very reasonable, right, about the business, the concept. And we were still early. We were pre-product. Everything was in development, so we didn't have like true data. We basically had a little bit more than an idea on a napkin. We had some prototypes and some user data that we had done through a beta test. And while most of the partners in the firm were asking great questions, there was one guy that was sitting right next to me, and he kept saying, so you don't have an MBA? I'm like, correct, I don't. However, I feel like I can, like I'm moving the company along, right? Like I'm looking for investors to help fill in gaps and knowledge that I don't have. I'm looking for a partner. And I thought that pacified him. I gave him a little bit more of a meaty answer at that time. And then he followed up within 2 questions of, well, you don't have an MBA, you have no business sense, and no one on your team has an MBA. And I was like, okay, agreed. I'm not trying to convince you that I don't. I'm well aware of the skills I haven't like traditionally learned. And then he asked a 3rd question about this again. And then I got up and I was like, listen, if you're making deals based on women that have, because they were investing in women, that was their whole thesis. And I said, if you're trying to invest in women that only have an MBA, you are probably missing out on a lot of amazing deals, because I can Google how to make a business plan. I cannot Google how to make a lateral flow assay. And then I walked out. And one of the partners actually chased me down. It was like, Amy, he's not going to be involved in our deal. We're really in. We want to be in this. I'm like, no, you let him into the diligence room, and it's not somebody I would want involved with Oova. I'm sorry. And I walked away from that. I was shaking. Oh my God. Like, how do you walk away from money? Especially like when they're telling you like we're in. And I walked away from it, and I was shaking in the elevator. But then I got out and I was like, man, I would have been shaking every conversation if I let them in. Versus now, I can get on the train and get on a call and actually be like, I'm moving my business forward, and not sitting in that anymore. So it's a really liberating experience once you kind of stand up for yourself once. And I've never looked back at that experience and thought I made the wrong decision.
Such power moves. And I just think that, we need to be hearing more of that, because I think the reality is, especially in the VC world, this stuff happens a lot. We just, it's undercover. No one talks about it. And so it's just so refreshing to hear you talk about it. You've gone on to raise Series A. Congratulations. Incredible. Talk to me a little bit about how you've navigated that raising process. I think we all know the stats. I'm not even going to repeat them because I just don't even want to. But, it's crazy how little we get as women when it comes to kind of that financing for our businesses. What have been some of your kind of hacks or tips, or, how have you gone about the raising process? Obviously, it seems to be with a lot of integrity, which is amazing, but what are some practical tips you can give us for our peers out there listening?
Okay, so I know you're not talking about the stats, but we all know they're abysmal, right? And that's a fact. That's not something to get on a high horse on or a pedestal and be like, this is not right, we have to change it. Of course we have to change it, but it's not happening like that. So the best advice I can give is accept it and know that this is the world that we're in. And if you want to move your company forward, play the game, right? It sucks. Yeah. It does suck. I'm not saying that I'm acclimating myself to it, but I am accepting it with knowing if I have to go raise, this is what I'm up against. So you can prepare that way. You know that women are being held at a higher bar. You have to show much stronger metrics than a counterpart male founder would have to. You're going to have to show stronger growth in a much more reasonable CAC. Like things are completely unreasonable in this world. You have to show that you can do it, right? And the thing is, women win because we do that. Right? I hear from investors all the time with the little amount of money that we have raised, the amount that we've grown and the way that this company is today is remarkable. And I'm just like, well, I know what's happening on the backside of this. Like my team is working their butts off to do this. But thanks. So I think one thing is just be aware of like, this is the world that we're fighting. The second thing I would suggest, like raising our Series A, and there's a ton of war stories I'm happy to share as well. But the biggest lesson I learned is you should talk to investors when you're not raising and build a relationship with them. Because again, what I've always been looking for are people and not money. If you want money, you can go find money. You can crowdfund, there's so many ways to get money. But if you're looking for an investor, you're looking for a person. And it's not just a fund. It's not just about getting these like name brand funds on your cap table. It's about getting a partner that believes in the business, the vision, in you, especially in these early stages, because they're not investing in just the company. They're investing in you and your team. So if you don't feel that, they're not the right people for you in an early stage company. So I can say that when we were raising our A, there was the fund that ended up leading. I actually built a really strong relationship with the partner that ended up leading our round. We had been speaking for about a year and a half. And we met quarterly for 30 minutes. And I spent most of those 30 minutes getting to know her and her getting to know me. We both had children the same age and or similar ages, and we got to know each other really well. The last 7 to 10 minutes was about Oova, right? And I would give her the teasers. You don't owe them anything. You don't need to give away your entire diligence room. That's not the purpose of these calls. The purpose is to get to know each other and see if there's a bond and a trust that you can kind of grow on before you're even raising. Then when the time came for us to raise, I hadn't even opened the round yet, but they preempted it. And so once they preempted it, all of a sudden there's all this flurry. And all of a sudden I have 3 term sheets in front of me. Now, the term sheet that we ended up taking wasn't the best one at the table. But, and this is kind of interesting too, where you end up following your gut. One of the term sheets that I was really leaning towards, I got to know that firm as well. And they were great. It was mostly, not mostly, I think it was all male dominated, which was fine. Again, I never looked at gender. It's more about, do you understand my vision? Do you understand what we're doing? And do you understand me? And we're about to sign the term sheet. And the main partner goes, Amy, I just have one last question before we sign. How comfortable are women really peeing on a stick? And I was like, okay, this is not going to work.
Wow.
And I walked away from it. And it was the best decision because I'm like, man, these people who are going to lead my round don't even understand my business or our market or our target or our product. What am I going to do at board meetings? Like, educate you every time? No. I need to get value out of you, not get you on board. So honestly, best decision I made going with the fund that actually preempted us because, man, like they've been an amazing partner for us. They were even more, they were supportive even before the term sheet was signed, which I think says a lot about the people that you bring around into your cap table.
I just love that story. Truly, I'm nodding along like I'm, I'm so involved, and I just feel that looking back and hearing your journey, end to end, it seems to me like that gut, really listening to it and truly following through. I think there's one thing to say, like, listen, quote unquote, listen to your gut. There's another thing to actually walk the walk. And honestly, Amy, you walk the walk, and it's truly inspiring. It really is, because I think especially when the stats are against us, especially when, in your case, it's a women-focused company, and you have someone going, hey, I'm so interested. It can be so tempting. And we all know what it's like. I mean, I've bootstrapped my company the whole time. Only in the last year did I raise a little bit. So it can be so tempting to go, oh my goodness, someone's interested in me. Let me follow through. But it seems to me that your gut has carried you through this. I've probably asked this before in our conversation today, but I want to ask it one more time to circle back on that. How can we get better at listening to our gut and actually following through on what our gut is telling us?
It has to be more pattern recognition. You have to be able to, like, you have to have some data to say, like, my gut has been right in the past and I need to continue trusting that. It's not easy. Like, yes, I walk the walk, but that walk is really shaky.
Facts.
Right. It's not like a strut as I'm walking away from that Zoom call. It's very much like crap, did I do the right thing? Did I just shoot Oova in the foot? Like, what am I doing? It's a lot of that. And I think it's easy to look back and be like, oh, everything was fine. But like, there's so many things unknown, right? Like the other term sheet wasn't signed. They could have pulled that right away. So I could have started back at square one with nothing. And it's a lot of risks that you have to take and be comfortable to take. So I think the way that I would recommend that you start trusting that gut is by looking at patterns and seeing like, okay, was my gut right in the past? And being really honest with yourself. What was the situation where it wasn't right? Was it actually my gut telling me the wrong thing, or did I not have all the data? Was there a question that wasn't answered yet? Was there a piece of like, was there some unknown factor that I wasn't aware of? And that's what controlled it? And when you start to dissect it a little bit more, you start to see like, okay, you know what? Like, I do know more than I thought I did. And that's usually the thing that's holding you back from trusting your gut. It's the self-confidence. And that's a really hard thing to build up. I'm still working on that.
Such valid advice. Amy, I want to dive a bit deeper into fertility, like our fertility and what we need to know. I've got the doctor in front of me. Let's get into it.
Yeah, sure.
What does the research say about a woman's ability to conceive in our 30s?
I mean, it's an interesting question because now if you look at how all the algorithms in our apps and all the fertility products out there and even all the protocols that are out there, they're really designed for women that have perfect 28-day cycles, are in their early 20s, and have a regular cycle. It's not designed for women that don't fit that mold. And unfortunately, as you get into your 30s, it starts to get more irregular. And even if you have a regular period, let's say you do somehow bleed every 28 days, as you get older, you don't always release an egg. So even if you're thinking you're timing intercourse accordingly, if no egg is released, you're not getting pregnant, right? There's just such a lack of knowledge that women have about their fertility overall. And I think that's the biggest hurdle that we have to get over. I do consults with our users all the time. And it's funny how I usually spend half the consult educating them on terminology because they'll say, oh, my cycle is only 7 days long. I was like, no, hold on. Your period, you're bleeding for 7 days. Your cycle is 32 days long. And they're like, wait, what do you mean? And I have to educate them on what a cycle means. All right, that's some basic information. Then when you think about, okay, I understand my cycle is 32 days long. I ovulate on cycle day 16. No, that's also not the case. We had a peer-reviewed paper that was published a year ago that actually showed that women, as they get older, their follicular phase gets longer. And so the day of ovulation gets later and later as you get older. And that's really important to know if you're trying to get pregnant post-30, right? And we start to say that, okay, anything above 35 is advanced maternal age. It's actually not true. That's just a ballpark figure that some power that be defined. We still ovulate. We still have cycles. It's just, it might not be as regular as when we were 20. But if you have data, you can actually start to take control of your journey again.
Yes. I'm just going to rapid fire. I'm just going to couple. What precautions should we take to really give ourselves the best chance at conceiving later on in life?
I think there's so much value in data, right? So let's say that you've been on birth control for 10, 12, 15 years. We are the generation that's been on birth control for such a prolonged period of time, right? We have no idea what the long-term effects of this are going to be. We're starting to see that. Some women get off birth control and they bounce right back into their cycle. But honestly, many of them have never even experienced a natural cycle. So they have no idea what's happening and how long their cycle is. So I think the first piece of advice I'd have is, even if you're not trying to actively get pregnant, understanding what your true natural cycle is so critical. Because if let's say you're 31 and you're not on birth control, but you're not actively trying to get pregnant either, you can start monitoring your hormones, see, am I ovulating or not? Is my cycle regular or not? Is is my progesterone going up properly? Is my LH surge happening accordingly? And at least when the time is ready for you to have children or try, you can walk into that journey prepared, right? If everything is fine, great. Yeah. You can wait a couple of years and start then. But if things are off now, you can start to mentally prepare yourself. Like maybe we need to think about egg freezing. Yes. Maybe we need to prepare ourselves for an IUI or IVF journey. And now when you get to that point, you're so much more informed and you're coming into it from a state of power versus defeat.
I so love that state of power versus defeat because I think the more info I get, the more data, it just really makes me personally feel so much more secure in the process. And I'm sure so many of our peers out there listening can resonate with that. So I love that you've just reflected that back to us. What is the number one piece of advice that you give to any woman? You probably just gave it to me, trying to conceive. Know your data.
I think the biggest piece of advice I would give to a woman, I wish somebody had said this to me on my journey, was to show myself some grace. Because I think when you're trying to get pregnant, and it takes two to tango, right? But the blame always falls on yourself. No matter how much we try and convince ourselves that it's not just us, it's like your body is failing you. My body is designed to have a child, and now I'm not able to get a child. So if I could have shown myself some grace during those dark periods, that would have probably saved me so much heartache. And I hope that women can do that. It's so easy to say, but it's my biggest piece of advice to just take a step back, believe in yourself, and just give yourself some grace.
Love that. I'm just going to let that sink in. Amy, thank you so much. This has been so illuminating, extraordinary. Your story is beautiful and amazing. Before we start to wrap up, I've got a couple of final questions for you, so I'll take you through those. So today's episode is our International Women's Day episode for 2025. Can't believe it's that time of year again. The theme of this International Women's Day is accelerate action. What does this mean to you?
Oh my gosh, I think we're in such an exciting time, right? Like, okay, of course, there's a tumultuous administration in place. There's a lot of discussion about women's health. It's really like the front of every headline right now. And that could be scary, yes. But what I think is actually a huge opportunity is that, hey, people are talking about women's health. We're getting the headlines. We're getting the platform to actually talk about this. Menopause is being talked about everywhere. And when you think about women's health, what do you think about? You think about fertility. You think about having children. Yet not every woman is going to try to have a baby or experience infertility. 100% of women that live to a certain age will go through menopause. And we know nothing about that yet, right? So I'm really excited about the current situation because I think we're being forced to actually have these hard conversations, illuminate the fact that there's minimal to no data to treat 51% of the population and get that information to them. So to me, that phrase means like, now is the time for action.
Oh, so good. What is something that you wish you could tell your younger self about either your business journey or your fertility journey?
Hire fast.
What is it? Hire fast, fire fast.
Right?
Oh, fire fast.
No, really. I think as a first-time founder, there were so many moments where I was like, I'll figure it out. I'll do it myself just to save burn. And I'm not an expert at everything. And I know that. Like in my head, in my heart, I know I'm not. But when it came time, a choice between like figuring it out and spending like a month to figure it out versus saving my burn, I always picked myself. And I wish I hadn't, because we probably could have been so much further along today had I hired like the experts. I'm seeing the value in that today because now my team is amazing. And it's so awesome when you get to like talk about a problem and then there's 3 people who are like, oh, I'll solve that for you. And they go run away and they solve it. And the next day I have the answer. So I wish I could go back and tell myself to just hire fast. Stop trying to do it all yourself.
I think that also lends so beautifully to what we were saying about like asking for help. You know, I think again, it's asking for help in business, asking for help in life. It's just, let's just ask for help more.
Yeah. And I think the struggle that I had with this was I didn't really know what I needed. So like when you ask for help, right? Let's say you're trying to hire a head of marketing. Okay, well, that's a title. You could put a job description out there. But then what is the job description? And what are the roles and responsibilities for them? Because if you're a direct-to-consumer company, head of marketing is very different than if you're a B2B company. And if you're in healthcare, it's even more different. And I was like, I don't even know like I would write these job descriptions. I'm like, that's not really what I need though. And it wasn't until I lived the role that I was able to say like, okay, these are the things I need someone to do because I just don't know how to do it.
Yes. How can we get better as women at believing in ourselves, whether it is our ability to navigate our business or our fertility?
What's the worst thing that can happen if you don't?
True.
Right? Like you make a mistake. Well, when you're starting out, the distance to fall is really low. Like think about an infant, right? Like when my son was learning how to walk, he fell all the time. But the distance to fall is so low. And he has a ton of padding, right? Now us as adults, like think about it like a senior company that's grown quite a bit. If we fall, there's a lot of damage that can happen. So I think one of the biggest assets that we have in an early stage company is to be able to fail multiple times, make mistakes, grow from them, and keep trying. So I would highly encourage everyone to just make the mistake. If you think it might be right, like you could be very well be wrong, but you could also be right. And you won't know until you try because ChatGPT is not going to answer it for you. Google's not going to answer it for you. And if you're really building something innovative, there's no model for you to kind of copy. That was one of our hardest things because we didn't have a business model that was cookie cutter. We weren't solely D2C. We weren't solely B2B. We were this merge. And there wasn't a model that we could follow. We had to build it ourselves. And that's what I think the challenge is for a true innovative company because you need to define this everything for yourself. But that's also a huge opportunity.
I love it. Amy, we could talk forever. I'm obsessed with this conversation. Truly, what you've built, your journey is so inspiring. Our final question, which is how we finish every episode of Peers, is what is the value of pursuing what you're most passionate about?
So starting a company is very difficult. You have to truly believe in it, yes. When COVID hit, the biggest challenge that I faced was I lost the ability of doors, right? Before COVID, I would be a mom when I woke up, take care of my son, go on the train, have me time, get to work. Now I'm a CEO running a company, not thinking about home, get back on the train, me time, come home, I'm a mom again, and not thinking about work. When COVID hit, I had no doors. I was sitting at my dining table, and if I'm doing an interview or if I'm talking to an investor and my son wanted food, he would crawl into my lap, lift my shirt up, and I'm like, all right, I guess we're doing this. There was no concept of doors. And to be able to persevere through that and be like, no, I'm going to figure out how to do it all and still make this company a success is you need to have so much passion to be able to do that because it's not easy. There's no day that is easy when you're starting a company. And no one told me that. People say it's a roller coaster. I had no idea what a roller coaster I was signing up for. But it's the belief that what you're doing is truly causing change and impacting people's lives. And I see that in our users every day. I hear it from our customers. I hear it from our clinicians. And that's what drives me to keep going every single day.
Amy, ladies and gentlemen, oh, I loved it. What a story. Wow. Where can we learn more about you and Oova?
You can follow us at Oova.life is our website, and at Oova Life on every social platform. We're always posting things, and I'm always accessible. So feel free to message us, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Amazing. We'll link them up in the show notes. Thank you so much again. It's been a blast.
Thank you.